Hi everybody, welcome to my channel, Life, Law, Bin.
Yeah, I think in terms of, I think we've basically touched everything because pupillage,
Yeah.
everyone knows you need a tier two, and there's some chambers that aren't very friendly. So do your research. Some chambers, unfortunately,
Yeah.
are not really interested in sponsoring international students. Some may actually say they don't. So I'd actually encourage people to do their research. And again, that one is quite expensive as well. All the visa roads are quite expensive. Did we miss anything?
Definitely.
Is there anything else that you feel persons should
No.
know um, when pursuing the bar as an international student, the difficulties and the realities?
I think no, yeah, we've kind of touched on it. I think definitely the one big thing to highlight is I think the lack of flexibility on student visas and inability to take academic breaks, right? We all know that sometimes
Yeah.
people need to take a few months off because of mental health issues or, death in the families and so many other things. So of course, the excess kind of increased financial pressures. Then, I mean, thankfully, I find usually once you hit the GDL and BPTC, there's not that international versus domestic student, but of course with the LLB programs or graduate law programs that are like 2 years, there is that difference in tuition, which most currencies are weaker than the pound, including the Canadian dollars. So there is that kind of where you're almost paying two times the cost. Yeah, which I think we've talked about. And then I think definitely kind of just ensuring that I think the big thing that if any kind of practitioners or chambers stumble upon this is just ensuring that kind of when you are offering that nice variety of legal work experience, that ensure that it can maybe be more formalized and that you kind of work closely with the students to ensure that they are kind of staying within. And I think that universities too, when they get sent opportunities, that they now blast out, if an international student expresses that interest in such a role, support them as best as you can to kind of figure out how they can maybe fit it into, whatever working hour restrictions they may have. I think, yeah, as you said, pupillage, I think it's definitely been covered in a few of yours. And I think the one thing that I may want to highlight is that I think maybe sometimes there's like a forgetfulness that most legal jurisdictions, especially those that like are born out of the British civil system, are relatively similar when it comes to what's necessary to qualify. So there's always going to be a relatively high threshold to both qualifying and requalifying in another country. And there are really not things that a candidate will take lightly because there are obviously massive financial and emotional costs, as you said, not being in your home country, being away from family. Those are things that we incur and undertake when pursuing our professional qualifications. So I do think that this idea that people are taking easier paths or doing this as a way to get around is very rare. It's not easy to for me to go back to Canada now after being called to the bar here to do that process. I can either go back and completely do a JD again, which is another 4 years of my life, or I can sit exams, which normally take about 2 years and have an incredibly high fail rate. So, it's not kind of oh yeah, this is, a great thing. I also think that chambers need to do a little introspection and realize that having informal policies in chambers that result in international applications basically having their applications binned right away is ultimately discrimination. So just like straight up discrimination. So I do feel like that's something to keep in mind. But I also do think that we as racialized international applicants need to also maybe be careful and aware of the space that we're taking up at the bar, because as I'm sure you're well aware of the bar stats that, it's like, I think under 30 of the people that are silk are black, and things like that. Like they're not great stats. So I do think that, but I do think we need to be aware that like we are taking up space, so to speak, because Black, British, obviously, and just other racialized people are still massively underrepresented at the bar. And there is the potential that those places for that those places from those that are from non-traditional UK backgrounds are instead going into to international student candidates who may be from slightly non-traditional, but maybe also internationally traditional backgrounds. So, you know, though you may be a racialized person, you could also be like a middle class person who both your parents are professionals in your country of origin, and that, you know, you now getting that pupillage is not maybe necessarily improving kind of social mobility and like being underrepresented at the bar. So I do think that there's that kind of fine line and balance that that obviously there shouldn't be discrimination towards international students who are more likely to be racialized, but that there also needs to be an understanding of the intersections that are at play and who may be kept out as more spaces may be made for international students in the years to come, just because, you know, the state, the white supremacist state function in a very funny way, and that will now think, oh, this is so fantastic, they're allowing international students, except that it'll be at the, you know, unfortunate behest of keeping out racialized and underrepresented, those from underrepresented backgrounds here in the, who are kind of UK domestic individuals. So I think that's probably the only thing that I would maybe touch upon with pupillage, but I do think, and I feel like increasingly chambers are really ironing out their policies quite nicely. So I am hoping more in this next round that chambers understand the need to kind of have like solid policies. Because I did have a lot of chambers too that I emailed, because we also have that thing where we're all emailing as many chambers and sharing that information, who were quite nice and apologized that it had taken them so long, but that they basically had to have meetings to decide like what their policy was. And so I do think that's something that would be quite nice if chambers tried to keep us up to date, and because I just feel like, is that not part of commercial awareness, like keeping up to date? Because not all your barristers are always going to be from the United Kingdom. So I do think keeping those policies up to date, because really I don't feel like it should be the sole responsibility of a pupillage candidate to educate chambers, especially since like I know that there's a really quite a sliding scale of chambers that you basically like do the visa application, or chambers will basically do the visa application for you. And it's like, come into office, sign this, bring your passport, done. And then there's others where it's like, you kind of like, you almost even help chambers register with the Home Office.
Yeah.
And like, sometimes chambers will even be like, no, I think you're meant to pay for it. Then we'll pay you back in your salary. It's like, that's not how it works. So really tightening up on that, which I think the Bar Council is doing a bit, but I do think that they can be a little bit more proactive and kind of leading that through. But yeah, I think those are things that I would maybe just touch upon, which are probably repetitions of things that other people have discussed, just with regards to kind of the pupillage beast as an international student.
Yeah, I think you've summarized and touched on the salient points, especially to do with pupillage. And I think anyone that's listening to this will recognize that there are some huge hurdles and the system is far from perfect. And with that being said, there is still a lot of work to be done to really ensure that there is not only equality, but equity and justice at the forefront, and allowing persons, everyone, to be filtered into a system, especially if they deserve it, especially if they've been working hard for it, and they're competent, more than competent, to fulfill those services. So I think you've highlighted that. And one thing I did recognize, besides the pupillage point, and I hope persons recognize what we've been saying and take this away, is that unfortunately, as an international student, yes, our mental health matters, but implicitly it is sidelined. We are expected to get everything done, to study and to sit those exams in a particular time period. And Tofunmi rightfully pointed out that although some people can take a break in their studies, take 2-3 months off, or take a few weeks off to kind of centralize and get back their focus, that's not something that we have been privy to experiencing. It's more of a get on with it mentality when we come here, because obviously there's certain
keep calm and carry on.
yeah, it's more of a get on with it.
Chin up,
Suck it up and let's get it done, because you're working within these restrictions. And hopefully these are things that for persons coming behind us, it will become better. I'm sorry, because it's not like I'm very proud to be bragging or to say, right, I then pulled myself together in a week and a half or two and got it done for civil litigation and criminal, because to be honest, it's just the grace of God. You know, I
Yeah,
could have
for sure.
actually been unhealthy. Something could have happened which could have led to awful results, which no one wants. So that
Mhm.
being said, that definitely isn't a solution. What I did, it means that there must be reflection from all stakeholders, really. So from the providers, from the universities, because even though in some cases provider tuition costs may not be very much different between international students and UK domicile students, I still paid more as an international student doing my
Yeah, for
bar course
sure.
in
When you
LLM.
kind of
So
count all the visa
oh
and
yeah,
of
and
course
it's and even
currency exchange.
my tuition was about
Yeah.
13,000 something, while someone else's was like nine. The
Mhm.
British student. So why I'm saying all of this is that there are a lot of stakeholders that are invested in this. International
Mhm.
students bring revenue money into the economy as well. So even if we didn't bring money, come on, it's just
It's
basic human
like
dignity and
human
kindness
rights and
that
yeah, for sure.
we need to start fixing the system. So down from universities to providers, bar course providers, to the bar council and to chambers, especially when they're on the front line and they have to start choosing and that kind of thing. So I'm so
Mhm.
happy we had this dialogue. I always think that things that need revolutionizing and changing will always be an uncomfortable discussion. So
Mhm.
especially uncomfortable for some persons who don't like change and who may take it as a direct critique or critical report of what they've been doing. But I think it has to be said, and I'm so grateful that you came
Mhm.
and accepted my invitation to have this discussion.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this has been great and so fantastic and just really nice to talk about it. And I'm glad that you're leading this conversation because I'm sure those who are, international and qualified prior to potentially may not have had, such easy. And I'm just glad the conversation because I think probably for my first, while prior to the GDL and when I was on the GDL and I went to we're in 2021 now, so it would have been the 2019 Bar Council pupillage fair. And let's just say I genuinely felt so gaslit during that entire because there was no chambers that I spoke to about, okay, what's kind of the process? And they were like, oh, I think it's easy, go on the chamber website. Yeah, this woman's from Australia. So I think not realizing that that woman may be from Australia and her father may be an Australian citizen, but mama may be a British citizen. And that might have been why it was easy and you didn't hear her complain. Or she just got down to work, did
Yeah,
it, but that
yeah,
actually was an incredibly rigorous process and she
yeah.
was never disclosed or you just were never aware. And so it was nice that Mikisa, I believe I must have seen, yeah, I think she tweeted it out and I joined the group and that people were actually having this conversation because I was like, I don't know if I'm going crazy, but like one thing that my former partner used to always say was like, the only hurdle that you're ever going to have at the bar is probably going to be your citizenship. Like you are more than qualified and more like than, but like your citizenship may be the only thing that makes it that you will consistently get like, I mean, obviously my gender and my race and all those things also play a role, but like that was going to probably be the primary thing that would end up kind of being my shortfall. And it definitely makes sense now kind of being more entrenched and speaking about it. And so it's amazing to know that this conversation is happening, that people are thinking about it and that people are thinking of solutions and that I find providers are more proactively. But I do think that I would like to say that I would like to see providers using kind of their ability to discourse with the home office to increase kind of like their place when it comes to conversations, to say that, the provider should have the right to assess a student internally and say, yeah, the student should be allowed to have this extension. Here's all the paperwork, send it to the home office. And the home office says, okay, provider, if you think that's a good idea, sure thing. We've extended their
Yeah.
visa now. Instead, you're not writing the exam on this day, or you need to take time away for bereavement, or the most ridiculous is like international students who end up having children and like like I've seriously seen a tweet in which she's like, the woman said that she had to, she had her baby on a Monday, had an exam on a Friday, and had to show up for that exam on a Friday kind of thing. Like that's how ridiculous it gets, where it's like, oh yeah, actually, like I suffered a gunshot wound, and but I was an international student and
You
my
had to
exam was
come
on a
in.
Tuesday. I had to go, like, yeah, I was post-op, but I still had to come. Like, that's how silly it gets. No, but honestly, like,
No,
that
this
is actually how those are the real, like, I'm sure we have not even heard like some nitty, but I've definitely heard some, like, and I remember I think the woman was doing doctorals or just something else, but I just remember being quite like flabbergasted that it was like by force by fire she had to go forward and do the exam, because it was just like, we can't give you that time off because we'd have to, that basically they gave an ultimatum. It's like, you either have to write it, or yes, we will have to report you to a home office, which means you put yourself at risk of deportation, so you might as well just go home, because you're better to leave voluntarily than leave involuntarily. So I'm quite happy
Tofunmi,
that
this is real talk, this is real talk. And these are kind of like it's like the hidden reality. A lot of people go through a lot of distressing situations, and one of
Mhm,
two things happen. One, they go through it, they conquer it, but then they don't want anyone to know about it. They hide it. They don't say anything
mhm,
about it. Two, you make it and you're actually successful. For example, making it into chambers, and you automatically just kind of forget that there are persons behind you that will struggle and go through this. And I feel like
mhm,
one of the best ways to start to initiate change is by just speaking about our experiences. You can't be silent, especially when you're going through problems, because you're not helping anyone else. It's actually quite selfish. You need to
mhm,
let people know the issues that you're going through, because these these stakeholders would never change if no one says, hang on a second, this system isn't
we have an
working.
issue.
And the
Yeah.
last thing I will say about providers is that international students have to stop being, to some person's mind, because it can be implied as this, as an afterthought. So, for
Mhm,
example, bring your marking of certain scripts in line with potential dates for expiry for people's visas. So, for example, the marking of my LLM, I actually had to write to my university to let them know the date for my visa
mhm.
is about to expire. Can
Yeah.
you kindly expedite the marking of my script so that I can apply for my graduate work visa? Thankfully, they did that and they were able to return those grades. But if I didn't push, if I didn't ask, and I mean numerous emails, because the first email I got
So,
from my visa advice team was, sorry, you missed that. That's nothing to do with us. Basically, these are my words. You could as well go home because you're gonna miss the graduate work visa thing. The essence of it was, you're
mhm,
gonna miss it because that's not the date we
mhm,
do things. And in my head, I just thought, well, this is wrong. I just overcame. These are the dates that you said can't be moved. These, because the
yeah.
centralized exam dates are the centralized exam dates. But the
Yeah.
internal assessments, that's what I'm saying. Providers have to start being forward thinking and recognize we do have some international students on board here. Even if we put out a message, a memo, are there any persons here on this course? I know we said that the LLM is supposed to be marked by August and giving you it back, but are there any persons here who are interested in the graduate work visa? And your visas expire before this date. Okay, no worries, we'll have this
Mhm,
tranche of marks being released before that date. Make it easy. Don't make other international students come and fall in the same trap as I did and
mhm.
have to write and beg you to expedite marks.
Yeah.
Do you know? And
Especially since, like, yeah,
it's these
it's
kinds
so
of,
common for them
yes,
to be so delayed. I know with my GDL, even I think the results were up like 2 or 3 weeks. And imagine you're waiting for a particular date for it to be done. And as you said, there should be that kind of like, we're going to flag and highlight who are international students who have, because I'm trying to think when I finished at McGill, for example, because obviously if you're going into law school, med school, postgraduate studies, sometimes you need to give your grades by a certain date of your
yeah,
first degree. And
yeah,
so what ended up happening was, for those of us who were in final year classes, we were flagged on the internal system at the university so that our grades and our our essays, our exams are marked prior to those who might have been in their third year but in a higher level class, or those who
Oh,
might be doing an extra term. And so I do think, as you said, providers maybe need to internally build some
yeah.
systems where it's like, because I do think too much of the time, especially when you get to professional course degree level, lots of things are just kind of like, it's like, oh well, you're doing professional course, so you should be able to stay on top of it and be the one to self advocate for yourself. And it's like, okay, that's fine if you want to put that onus on us, but the thing that needs to be thought about is the fact that I'm juggling like 110 things. The amount of people who have told me, like, you've been in the UK for this long and you have a mini pupillage and you have this and you have this, like literally I landed on a Monday on a Sunday and basically had a few days off before it was like preparing for a bar related interview. I have a full mini pupillage next week. Then I start classes the week after that. Then I have this, then I have that. And on top of that, I'm doing a remote internship. Like, it's just like, I'm not sitting here eating bonbons and, twisting my hair. I'm doing a lot. So for me to also have to keep on top of things that are quite like bureaucratic things, I just like,
Yeah.
should it not be you saying that, hi Tofunmi, we've noticed in our system that your visa is going to expire on June 30th and the LLM results are not going to be given until August 30th. Here are the things that you need to do to, which, like I said, it obviously varies by provider. Maybe
Yeah.
my experience will be different at City. I'm not going to say the name of where I did my GDL, but those are the syllables of it. But but like that's like that I would not, I'm sure it would be an absolute shambolic mess if I were to have done my if I were about to do my barrister training
Yeah.
course with them. So I do think that, yeah, there needs to be, I also do think that, there needs to be a formalization too of what is being done at the provider level. I think there's still too much discrepancy. I'm not sure if you saw the recent stats that were released of like pass rates, and like I think ICCA had the best and
Yeah.
had the absolute worst. And like that's something that needs to be discussed, is why would there be such that level of discrepancy? It's probably not because the people who were on that course were unintelligent, or it's probably because they were not supported. I have friends who just finished the ICCA one, and the world of difference, she had, like, my friend had a baby in the middle of, and was able to still finish it, heavily supported throughout the entire process by the kind of administration of the university. And I think that, like I said, there's just still too much discrepancy. And I do think that there needs to be a little bit more of a slamming down on, if providers are not kind of doing it right, like you maybe lose your provider status, and you no longer are able to kind of afford and offer that
I
course.
agree.
Oh girl, I could talk
No,
about this for days.
no,
Let
I
me get a
agree.
tea,
I
because
agree because the thing about it is obviously the response to the arguments being put up by my provider was, well, academics wouldn't be expected to mark at this time. And yes, I understand there are time constraints. Me saying this, it comes over as a surprise to you, but you have to understand that I feel like an afterthought because you should have predicted this. This is not something new. You have to understand that your visa
they sponsored the
department
visa, so how
should
do
be
you not know?
liaising. You know what I mean? They should be liaising with you
Yeah.
guys and just what you proposed. All you need to do now, you had myself as an experience. I'm sure I am not an anomaly. You will have other international students who will want
For
to do the
sure.
same thing. So what do you
Yeah.
do? I understand if for myself you probably were scrambling. We all make mistakes, but simply don't let it happen again. Start
Yeah.
making sure that you put policies in place where you recognize, just simply as you described, we will have a group of students who will need marks back by this particular time. Let's be aware of that, and let's make sure we have enough academics available to mark those scripts, get those out. And then obviously when those persons go on vacation, we have another group getting ready to mark this, and just
Mhm.
ensure that the level of consistency across the marking is the same. That's it. I just think it needs
That's
some
all.
thought. Honestly, I just think it needs some thought, and just a sit down group meeting, and you recognize the issues because you're catering to different kinds of students. Start addressing different people's issues so we can have some
Yeah.
equity. you know
For sure. Yeah.
well, I think we
No,
had a
I totally
ball.
agree.
I
Yeah.
think we had a
Yeah,
blast
I
with
did.
this one.
Yeah.
I am so happy that we were able to have this conversation. as I said, everything starts with a chat, and hopefully this
Will
people would
snowball
start,
into something.
people would start
Yeah.
talking about it even more. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for coming. I enjoyed it,
Yeah.
and I'm sure it would be beneficial to someone who probably didn't even know, as we'd say, sleeping on these issues. You know.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah. So thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And if you're ever in London and once it's winter time and the skating rinks are out, I'll give you some lessons. We'll rent some skates and
Yes.
I can give you some. I
I'll
can
bring down my
make the bar
volleyball
pay.
hats. I'll bring my
Yeah, yeah.
volleyball hats so that I don't
Just
get
like,
bruises. But thanks a lot. Thanks a lot,
no
Tofunmi.
problem.
We'll
So much
we'll
for
catch up
having me.
another time. Everyone else, I'll
Yeah,
see you again on
definitely.
the next video.